Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's session. Today we have a panel discussion around the carbon markets opportunity for Hong Kong. So I believe a lot of you guys have been heard about this topic, and some of you may be quite familiar with this, but some of you guys may be, I know around what is it about, but want to know more details. So today we are very honored to have three prestigious guests here. We have Agnes, the Chief EC.ESG investment strategist from BlueOnion. We have Andy from Baron Corporation, and also we have Felix, the founder and CEO of the Carbon Exchange Center. So let's start about asking our panelists to share a little more about what is carbon market and all sort of things. So today's session, I'll have some questions, and I think we are happy to have all our guest inputs, because I think the carbon topics is quite broad, and you guys may have different perspective. Also, you guys will have a lot of different experience given carbon trading. Some people will talk about how the corporates work, and also how as an investor, how do you think, and also Felix maybe as an exchange, as an intermediary, also as a supporter around this market, how do you think? So the one question I think is happy to have everyone to input. And I think after the section also we'll open the ground to have all our members and our guests here to ask our panelists questions. So that will how it works. So Agnes, how about we start with you? So can you introduce a bit what's the current state of the voluntary carbon market trading, and also how has it evolved over time?
Thank you, Andy. Good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon to my fellow panelists. I think this question is best answered by Felix, because he's about carbon trading. However, since you wanted the oldest person to speak first, so I will start and then pass it on to my fellow panelists. So the voluntary carbon market is rather young compared to the compliance market. As you know, California had a compliance market in the 1990s, and Europe started their compliance market in 2005, and now it's on the fourth stage. Voluntary carbon markets, really the activity that picked up a few years ago with the spot market. I think Felix, correct me if I'm wrong, with the spot market, 70% of trade in 60-something, 70% of the trade would have gone through expensive. So in Hong Kong, we also have a voluntary carbon market. We are like a year and a half behind Singapore. However, when Singapore launched, their inaugural volume was under 200,000 tons or 200,000 credits. Each ton of carbon is one credit, right? But Hong Kong, with our inaugural batch of trade, was already nearly 400,000. And the price range varies because it depends on the kind of projects, the origins of the projects, the nature and the vintage of the project. So it is becoming to be picking up. China had a CCER since 2013, but they stopped vetting or approving voluntary carbon credits in 2017 because there was more supply than demand. However, by the end of second half of last year, the price, because they stopped approving, so the market was still using the previously approved credits. So by the second half of last year, the price, the supply was less than the demand, and so the price went above the national market, which is a compliance market in Shanghai. So China had the compulsory or the compliance market pilot for the last 8 to 10 years in 7 spots and added 8 spots. But then it was only in 2021, I believe, in July, that Shanghai had a national market. And the price range around 50 renminbi, right? But then the CCL market in the Beijing Green Exchange had gone up to a little bit above that. So there now, China is beginning to consider, there's a consultation going on, consider opening up this voluntary market again. So in other parts of the world, there are something like 60-something exchanges all saying that they do voluntary carbon credits trading, but then the prices all vary and the liquidity is very, very low. So I'll just ask Felix to correct me and fill in more.
You're absolutely right. There are two markets. The voluntary market just explained. The other one is compulsory. For the business sector, we basically will focus on the voluntary market because it's much more easier to trade. It's not controlled by any legislations, but the price is lower than the compulsory market. I'll give you some example of the market price. In China, 1 ton of carbon costs about 60-something RMB per ton. But in Europe, it costs about 90 euro and it's going up. In Japan, it's 10,000 yen per ton, which is 10 times, 12 times more than the price of China. So this is how why I'm so interested in doing this trade, because the price difference is so big, 10 times, 12 times difference. It's not talking about how many percentage, it's talking about how many times. So it's so attractive, but this is not that easy to do that trade. And the problem in China is it's a big market. They create a lot of carbon because China is the largest polluted country in the world. Taking into account of 25% of the world carbon emissions. So the central government, Special Chairman Xi, already made a very big commitment that China will reduce the carbon emissions by 2060. So this is the government target. So certainly I believe that he will do it, he can make it. But the other problem is the CCER, that is the China standard, has already stopped, and nobody knows when it's going to relaunch. Some rumors saying that it will be relaunched this year, but it hasn't happened yet. But the problem is, even though it's relaunched this year, there is political problem, it's geopolitical. A lot of the international buyers, they do not recognize the CCER certifications. So even China relaunch the CCER standard might not be able to sell it internationally. So this is a very big challenge for the market players. So the reason why I started this business up as exactly 1 year ago, what sort of things that inspired me to start this up was the last policy address of our Chief Executive, Carrie Lam. His last policy address already mentioned that the Hong Kong government will work together with the Guangzhou Carbon Exchange Center to create an international carbon exchange platform in Hong Kong, which that happened last November. John Lee's administrations already launched that last November through the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. It is called the Kwok Climate. So it launched in a very low profile way. The reason why was that is there is not too many of trading happening in Hong Kong, even though the overall transaction is over 40 or now maybe 500,000 tons so far. But if you imagine, well, in average the cost is about 1,000 Hong Kong dollars per ton. So 500,000 is about 50 million Hong Kong dollars. If you think about using 5 months times to do 50 million thousands of transactions, It's a very small business. And it's using the Hong Kong Stock Exchange platform. And you can imagine that it's not so popular right now in Hong Kong, the carbon trade. So how can we speed that up or develop this carbon trading business? Then we have to ask this expert here, and I'll pass it to you.
Well, thank you, Felix. This is kind words. Thank you, Agnes. Hello, everyone. Going back to your question first, I think I think the market is very disjointed at the moment. There's American market, there's Euro market, there's China market. Basically, these three markets are the most important market. But the American and Europe market is very mature already. They are basically doing cap and trade, all the industry standard registration body, international exchange, primary market, secondary market, everything is being done. It's very mature already. And we are actually a little bit of catch up to do, but catch up is also opportunities. So we do not have primary markets in Hong Kong, of course, but there are a lot of funding here. How can we use the funding to achieve, to play up the secondary market, and how we can, Felix mentioned the carbon core, how we can invite overseas adjusters, registries to be here first, to understand the project and how to integrate with CCER. I understand CCER is kind of open because the deadline is coming, to be honest. Everyone is looking at the deadline, and then next month there are ISSB standard coming out as well, and which a lot of things in the very near future will become mandatory. And we are in an imperfect system, but we still need to make it work. So that's how I see it, and there's a lot of opportunity on this side of the world. We are trading in the American carbon registry, and I'll talk a little bit more later on. But I think it's a disjointed system at the moment, but how can we bridge it over? There's a lot of opportunities.
If I may clarify one point, so primary market and secondary market in the stock market, we understand it, right? But in carbon credits, as soon as a carbon credit is being transacted, it has to retire. It has to be retired so that there will be no retrading of the same carbon credit, because then we avoid double counting. So when we think about secondary market or extended market, we might be thinking about derivatives or bundles or tokenized credits, that sort of things, which has to come only after we see high liquidity and frequent trading and lots of participants. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Andy.
Yes and no, because I agree with exactly what you said. And because once carbon credit is used up, it will need to be retired. And any secondary trading will need to be a derivative and everything. But the thing I see in my American counterpart is, because we're doing carbon capture and storage, and there are storage elements. There are big players around the world. We just have one force. But there are players in the world who have force all over every continent. They are doing huge storage facility at this moment. Once we capture the carbon, it's serial coded, and before we put it on the exchange, it's serial coded first. And if you don't put it on the exchange, it's stored. It's stored up first, and it's undergo an MRV process, which is called monitoring, review, and verification process. And in the way that they build so big, the storage facility, it's just like oil. We're in the oil industry as well. If you have tank farms, that you stored everything first, and you trade it later. That is a kind of future. I don't know, maybe you correct me if I'm wrong, but they are thinking about it. It may not work, it may work, but there is a lot of money involved. People want to make it work. Because everyone, this is not a mature market, mature thing. Everyone is learning along the way. So if they are building such a big storage unit, what are they doing for? So this is the thing that I think they may proceed into and may answer your questions just right now.
Maybe we have to ask Felix.
Yes. It used to be no secondary market because, as explained, people might be double counting, double selling, and that sort of thing. But now, because we can use the blockchain technologies, we can solve this problem totally. And now, quite a lot of investors just buy the carbon credit and set them up and wait for the value to go up and resell it. So there will be a secondary market. It will be very active, especially if we use the blockchain technologies to solve all the old problems.
Except that there's a vintage issue, right?
Yeah, that's why MRV comes in.
Yeah, thank you. A lot of input just now. So we are seeing the market is quite new. I think a lot of development over time in these years. So we are talking about the carbon credit. Whether why you pay $50 per ton or pay $130 per ton. So what's the importance of doing carbon trading? How does it help the corporation and the society, and why corporations should start trading carbon?
Well, the most important thing is we're not. Why the corporations have to do the carbon trading? Because we have to help the world. We have to help climate change. Okay, because there are so many carbon emissions right now. Because climate change is affecting the human being. For example, especially Hong Kong, we don't feel that too much about the climate change until last year, especially my personal feeling. Last November, I live in Hong Kong for 50-something years. I've never seen typhoon number 8 in November. If everybody remember. How come that we have typhoon number 8 in November? Okay, for the European, they feel that they have a strong feeling on the climate change because in last summer, everywhere in Europe is over 40-something degrees. For us, 40-something degree may not be a problem because outside 40-something, here is 20. So we have air conditioner everywhere, at home everywhere. But in Europe, they don't have air conditioners. They really feel the heat. Okay, that's why the European so concerned about the climate change. For the Americans, if you remember last Christmas time, there was a sudden change of temperature, dropped 20 degrees of Celsius of temperature within 30 minutes. Not half a day, covers 70% of the whole America. So why this happening? So certainly it's climate change. So a lot of people are saying that climate change. What can we do? We have to reduce the carbon emissions. We have to do a lot of things. 3 weeks ago, I went to London and attended a conference. There was a parliamentary member from Pakistan saying that Pakistan is actually suffer from climate change quite a lot. She said, we need, of course, the world to help to work together on climate change, but especially the business sector. Without the business sector, he said, this cannot work. Why? Because what is the incentive for the business sector to do something on environmental protections, on doing something to reduce the carbon emission, especially the manufacturing industries? If there's no incentive, nobody would care too much about. But now I discovered something, it's called the carbon credit. So for example, especially in the manufacturing sector, most of the carbon emission is actually from the factory. If you think about the world history, 1,000 years of the world history, the first 800, the carbon emission is very low. In 18-something, after the industrializations, the last 200 years, the carbon emissions was going like this. Let's prove that everything's from the manufacturer, from the factories, the carbon emissions. So if you teach all the manufacturers in the world to reduce the carbon emissions by introducing some new environmental technologies, new environmental production lines in order to reduce the carbon emissions and create something called a carbon credit. And the carbon credit has a value, can make money, it will do it. Right? So that's the some sort of incentive that the business sector should work on it.
Thank you, Felix. So we all know that the carbon credit will help companies to combat the climate change, or also help them to achieve a net zero target, or help them to achieve a carbon neutrality. So if company would like to start trading carbon, should they just open an account at carbon trading center? This is not advertising, but how can companies start do their trading? Who they can find, what they should start considering before they start the first trading?
Well, for individuals, there are misconceptions around. For individuals, you cannot trade carbon credit. For corporations, yes. But you have to register within certain registry, say within your ECM. How do you offset your requirement? For example, we are doing a cap and trade in our American industry. Every industry has its own cap. Above that cap, you need to pay a tax, or either you buy a carbon offsets. So this is one way of doing it. In Hong Kong, we do not have a VCM yet, so it's difficult to transact within the core climate at this moment. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but I think a lot of companies are doing it by investing into carbon reduction emission projects, and that's a way of offsetting their climate action requirements as well. Give an example is how I convince my board to do carbon related project is, okay, you have certain criteria from the financial institution, you have to give out your climate transition plan to your bank. What are you going to do with your carbon footprint? Everyone will have one carbon footprint, someone is big, what are you going to do with it? So if you are not going to do it, it's not going to impact the environment, it's going to impact you. So either you impact the company or impact you, so you have to do it. So that's the logic behind it. Agnes.
So corporations, whether they are in Hong Kong or not in Hong Kong, they are in different sectors. Some of them have very difficult to abate kind of carbon emissions. No matter how hard they try to reduce carbon emissions from their operations or the products or the services, it's really going to be very, very hard to get into zero, right? So for those companies, they would have to resort to some means, i.e. Getting some sort of RECs from the utility companies, or buying carbon credits from either the compliance market, if they are forced to within their own ETS system, like in Europe or in California or in China, or they can choose to buy these carbon offsets from voluntary carbon markets, which is like Core Climate, which was launched on Hong Kong Stock Exchange last October. And South Korea, New Zealand, Australia, there are a lot of them. However, the prices are very different. So I heard Felix was quoting some prices. So prices in China are about 55 renminbi a ton, give and take 10 renminbi. Prices, like Felix said, it went up to €100, and the World Bank predicts that the compliance market could go up to 100, 150, 200. Well, to give an example, New York City already has a legislation saying that if you have a building and you emit over and above a threshold of emissions from 2024, you're going to be charged a penalty. And that penalty of carbon credit per ton is like $280 per ton. And so that's the highest price that I'm hearing. But then the rest of it, the high prices all pertain to compliance markets. The voluntary market, the prices that was traded in Core Climate of that nearly 400,000 tons inaugural and now close to 500,000 tons, depends on the project. Reduction is a big term, but reduction comprises of two things. One is removal, like sequestration or forestry. The other one is avoidance, like your EVs, your renewable energy production. So these two kinds, depending on the projects, the jurisdiction, the vintage, whether they are verified by internationally recognized standard with integrity, they range between $2 to $12 traded. Now could be higher now, but forestry projects are roughly about $4 to $6 so far in the last so many years that they've been traded. So you're talking about a wide variety, and it's not a commodity. So corporates that want to buy these carbon credits will really have to know, are these real good credits that we're buying? Are they verified? So even Vera, which verifies like 60-70% of the world's carbon credits, recently was under attack because their forestry credits were found to be dubious. South Pole, that is the largest carbon credit, carbon credit fund, like your fund, they have a $1 billion revenue a year, and even they have been questioned. So the integrity and the trust in these voluntary carbon credits has been jeopardized a little bit. So corporates really, with the very hard to abate carbon emissions reduction, then they have to go and look for these sort of solutions for the short term before carbon storage and sequestration technology can scale. Now the latest one in Greenland can only take up 4,000 tons of credits a year, whereas in the world, every year we produce 52 billion tons of carbon equivalent. It's not all carbon dioxide, 35 billion tons carbon dioxide, the rest of it nitrous oxide and methane, but methane has a very high global warming potential. Like in this 20 years of life, it has 84 times GWP over and about carbon dioxide. So if I were a corporate, I want to go and look for your carbon credit to buy, I will really have a lot of questions, and I want at least 4 or 5 attributes to make me feel that, understand that that's a quality carbon credit. And that's what Core Climate is suggesting, that everything that they trade is quality.
Thank you, Agnes. Yeah, and that's another point that there's a lot of controversial different views in the market seeing carbon credits. Say some people think, you may have heard some people saying that it's a zero-sum game, whether there's any real reduction or real savings in the world, or some people say that whether it's an offset rather than reduction. So maybe we also hear from Felix and Andy, what do you think about this argument from the market, and what are the common misconceptions people have?
Especially the forestry. The forestry projects right now, even some people, the guidance from in charge of Willa, whether your certification on forestry is really very positively in that way, but I'm working on the third way. The traditional way is forestry and renewable energies. I'm working on manufacturing. As I said, most of the carbon emissions are actually from the factory. So if you can educate or control the emissions from the factory, that is a real reduction. So once we certify the factory reduce certain amount, that is a really reduction on the carbon emissions. And that forestry is helping to absorb the carbon. With renewable energy is doing something to, for example, carbon, what was the word? Carbon capture, that sort of thing. But the actual reduction is from the manufacturers. So I'm working on the manufacturing side. So to prove that it's much easier than forestry and renewable energies. And the factory do production every year. You can make sure they reduce it every year, and it's countable. right? But I mean, we just mentioned about maybe I talk a little bit more on the Hong Kong situations, because we are from Hong Kong. We have to know what the Hong Kong government is doing. The Hong Kong government is not going to make any legislations on this area. No, just let the voluntary market to do it. But there's no manufacturing industry in Hong Kong. This is why the Hong Kong government only controls two areas. The first one is the electricity area. They only control the two electricity company because they account for 60% of total carbon emission in Hong Kong. The second area, the Hong Kong government controls the transportation sector, the MTR or the KMB, or the buses, the minivan, the taxi. That accounts for 20%. So the Hong Kong government, if they control these two sectors, already 80% of the carbon emissions, they're already under their hand. The rest is the EV car, food wastage, and that sort of thing. So this is why the Hong Kong government is not too keen to do a lot of things on climate change and environmental protection and that sort of thing. But still, when they create the core climate, they have to make sure that it works. So now the monetary authority and the Hong Kong Stock Exchange is making some tight guideline to all the listed companies on the ESG requirement. So, traditionally, you have to write the ESG report in the annual report. So it's not, they don't require too much of serious requirement. But now they start to have to do the auditing. So PwC have got a lot of new business. And but now they're going to tighten that up on the requirement and have to ask all the listed companies, what do you do on carbon reductions? But most of the listed companies in Hong Kong, they are financial area, in the financial area, insurance, professional, trading, that sort of thing. Not too many in the industrial side. They cannot reduce too much. Eventually, they have to buy from the core climate. This is how the Hong Kong government is going to make the core climate work. Will be very soon.
The Hong Kong stock market is a very weird animal. So, you know Warren Buffett, right? Our investment guru. He says if your market capitalization is 2 times your GDP, then it's a bubble, or a bubble is exploding. And so New York and US market is always like around 2. But Hong Kong's market capitalization has been between 12 to 16, 17 times of our GDP. A lot of our listed issuers, now we are very close to 2,600 listed issuers. I just came off a conference with my friends at SFC and at Kwok Climate and HKEX, and we've been chatting. And so with nearly 2,600 listed issuers, 43% roughly have mainland operations or background, but they comprise of 60% of the market cap that we have traded. And a lot of them, actually, when they look at carbon emissions, they comply with the Hong Kong Stock Exchange's listed companies Appendix 27 or maybe Appendix 20 for GEM listed board listed members. They actually, at the back, they comply with the Chinese standard. So whatever, if they have a dual listing, definitely they will comply with Shenzhen or Shanghai first. And then they will look at, with PwC's help, how do they comply with Appendix 27 as well, write a narrative and so on. But I was thinking that when companies really want to buy carbon credits, the one way is to, of course, go to experts like yourself and go to exchanges And another way, they always go to consultants. There are a lot of consultants, some of them have already blockchain ESG data, like EY, I'm sorry to mention this name, but I was just reading that they started already blockchaining carbon data so that the companies can understand how much carbon credits they need to buy, if they want to buy it, or they can sell if they are good projects. However, if companies are very serious about their climate action, like CLP and MTR is on its way, but a number of companies very serious, like Unilever, if you have 1-star listed company, that would be Unilever. If you have a non-listed company, that will be Patagonia or Interface in the United States. However, if you look at Unilever's sustainability report, they decide that they will have zero carbon by 2039. 2039 is very near. So companies that cannot reduce the emissions, like Unilever has done, like steel, cement, some manufacturing, of course they are, power generator. If they go and buy carbon credits, then it's only the hard to abate, the residual part can be counted under science-based target as counting towards the reduction of carbon emissions. Otherwise, they cannot be counted. So if I spend money to buy carbon credits and it cannot be counted, then that's another budget and another consideration.
Yes, thank you, Agnes. So I think just now we talked about how to reduce, whether we should solely rely on carbon credits, right? So one of the key things is that, so understand your carbon profile or your carbon footprinting, how much carbon you have right now, and what's your decarbonization plan. So the decarbonization plan as well as carbon credit should be used in combination to help companies to achieve net zero. So I think one of the few last questions, looking ahead, what do you guys see the carbon market in Hong Kong or internationally? And do you guys have any foreseen any plans, or you will see the carbon market help your corporation to achieve certain targets or certain success?
I see a lot of opportunity, which Felix and Agnes already mentioned, the whole climate, because China is really in need of internationalize its project and how it's going to merge with the international scene on the carbon trading. So I think the carbon market in Hong Kong has a lot of things to offer, because money is all over here. But how are we going to do it? Can we invite the overseas certifier, and just what I suggested before, to give good carbon credits over here, so that to create trust between the investor and the exchange and the offerings? And can technology be, like what Felix just said, blockchain be implemented so that all this credit can be traced back, so that there is no bad credits? Again, it's the trust again. And can other rating agencies or even insurance companies or even risk management tools be inserted within the core climate exchange, so that to give back trust, a lot of trust, in order to internationalize the market between China and the international scene? And if we can do that, I think there is a lot of upside in Hong Kong's market, because a lot of money in this region. But how are we going to do it?
I see the business will be growing very fast, especially the carbon price. There is a survey saying that by 2030, which is 7 years later, the carbon credit price will be 10 times more than today. Because the major reason was because there will be a significant increase in demand, especially in Europe. Why in Europe? Because the European unions already make legislation on carbon tax. It's already imposed, but it's not. But there's a transitional period for 2 years, and they will not implement that until 2025 or 2026, 2-3 years later, which is not far away. So all the European companies, if they cannot fulfill the requirement of the European legislation on reducing the carbon emissions, have to pay tax, right? So if a European company, for example, I always make this an example, H&M, if they have to pay 1 million euro of tax, why don't I buy €500,000 worth of carbon credit to offset my commitment, and I'm better off. I don't have to pay the tax. So that's one part. The second part is the EU is drafting a list of import products that we do not know what it is right now. It's drafting. So all the imported products from everywhere in the world, especially of course from Asia, if those products cannot fulfill the requirement of the legislations on the carbon emissions on producing the product, cannot be imported, or have to pay additional import tax on that. So the manufacturer in Asia definitely have to be aware of this, or have to prepare to do something on reducing the carbon emissions right now for the preparation of that list. Of course, we do not know the list right now. So the requirement on this is definitely going up. The third situation is happening is there are so many big international corporations, again, H&M. Because I'm from the textile and garment industry, so I know a lot of things about the retail, the fashion retail sector. H&M already made commitment 2 years ago that the whole supply chain of H&M have to reduce 30% of the carbon emissions by 2030, again 7 years time. So if H&M cannot, the whole supply chain of H&M cannot fulfill the H&M requirement, H&M have to do something. So right now, all the supplier or the manufacturer of H&M have started to reduce the carbon emissions by themselves in order to fulfill the H&M requirement. Otherwise, H&M will not give them the business. Even though your product is so cheap, it's so good quality, or so whatever, if you cannot commit on the carbon emissions that the H&M committed, you'll be out of the site. So not just H&M, Burberry, Adidas, Zara, all these have all made commitment on this area. So you can see that the requirement on carbon credit will be huge. And that's why the prices will be growing in a very fast way. And you did mention that traditionally the business is B2B, but it's going to be B2C also, because there will be something called carbon coin. It's going to be launched soon, which is a cryptocurrency. It can go directly to C, the consumer. So, I mean, that can be another commodity, could be speculative. So, I mean, there are so many different opportunities is going to happen in this area.
Thank you. So for sure, supply is going to be less than demand when everybody needs to decarbonize. Even the banks and the investors, they have to decarbonize their portfolios, right? So yes, the prices will go up. However, how do we judge whether the carbon credits that we buy or even the coins that we buy have the characteristics of quality? So we need to look at, if I were to purchase a corporate or even an individual, I need to know the at least the additionality, whether if I buy that or put money into that project, has it been in existence before? If it has been, then there's no additionality. It's only if I put money in the project and that project really then is being done to reduce carbon, either capture or reduce in some other way, then it satisfies the first characteristic, and that it has to be permanent. If you have a forest, somebody was trying to sell me an NFT in a Peruvian forest, one tree, $200 and say, Agnes, in 10 years time, it's going to be $20,000 for that NFT. I was thinking, okay, maybe that tree is mature, because trees take around 18 to 25 years to mature to be able to really effectively absorb the carbon, except eucalyptus in Australia, it takes only about 10, 12 years. But if that tree is still standing in 20 years' time, so the second criteria has to be permanence, right? And then the third criteria, it has to be, as Felix said, has to be verified, and CCL is not being trusted. So, but I know that there are some friends of mine who are already building an Asian verification body. So verified by a standard that has integrity, and then the MVR or MRV, which is monitoring, verification, reporting, and all that. And then an exchange that can allow them to register, to retire, to trade, to settle, all that jazz. Okay, so once we have all that, then of course the market will pick up and the volume will pick up and prices definitely will have to go up. But just coming back to a very last point, and that is our own Hong Kong's Financial Services Development Council had a report issued recently, and it predicts that by 2027, the voluntary carbon market would be like $17.1 billion. Now that is a low prediction, because I've read various other reports by credible bodies that says by 2030 or something like that, that market is going to be around $50 billion. I've read another report that says by 2027, the total market will be like $2 trillion. But that will comprise both the spot market and a lot of derivatives and the tokens and the coins and whatnot, right? So, but Hong Kong, how do we benefit from that? Very simple, very simple. There are at least two ways. One is because we already have a credible market, BCM Core Climate Stock Exchange, and China already has green exchange, Beijing Green Exchange, which is designated for the voluntary carbon market. So you know that we have a very successful Stock Connect, right? So why not having a Carbon Connect between Hong Kong and Beijing Green Exchange? That is totally workable. The second thing is that with the compliance market, Greater Bay Area is going to be working towards a unified carbon credit market. And this unified market is a compliance market that will talk to, trade with the other ETS. So right now, Shanghai is only trading have 2,250 companies that they nominated, they pointed, they said, you are the high emitters. And those are fossil fuel related energy generators. The rest of the other manufacturing and the other sectors are still inside the 7 other pilots. But eventually, if within 3 years, China is going to grab these, put it into the national exchange. And so instead of covering 30% of China's emission now, just now I heard the number, China is emitting 25% of carbon credits, carbon emissions of the world. It depends on whether you count carbon dioxide or all the gases, but roughly 30%, right? 25-30%. Now, of that, 30% of emissions is covered by the energy generators that depend on fossil fuels. Right now it's in Shanghai, the ETS in Shanghai. But in 3 years' time, they're going to grab the other sectors as well, which means 60% of China's emission will be traded in the national ETS. Now, if Greater Bay Area has a connection with Shanghai's ETS, and Hong Kong being a financial hub in the Greater Bay Area, and President Xi, Xi Jinping, right? Last time when he was in Hong Kong in July, what did he say? He said Hong Kong is best positioned as the springboard between China and the rest of the world. Springboard is not a bridge. Springboard is you jump and leapfrog. So foreign investors can come through Hong Kong and buy carbon credits, quality credits in China, and China can go out. China already has Mongolia and Xinjiang projects that has gone out to the rest of the world, and so that can develop. So at least two very, very interesting developments for Hong Kong. And if Hong Kong have all these great mines and great trading and great volume coming through with liquidity, then there can be derivatives market, tokenization, blockchain, everything else, and we will be a very good voluntary carbon market for the rest of the world.
Thank you, Agnes. So how about, let's see our floor, our members. Do you have any questions to our panelists after they have shared a lot of the market, the opportunities in different areas?
Thank you. First, I'm coming with a European perspective. So slightly different angle there. Before 2022 in Europe, I would say it was kind of BAU. There were some events, but 2022 was a year where the public opinion totally changed. Before that, every company was announcing their net zero target, and everything was roughly fine. After that, any company that was announcing a net zero target doing only offsetting was considered doing greenwashing. So things are changing a bit in the mindset of the broader population, but how to avoid tendencies that would be kind of offsetting our way of the decarbonization on the, I would say, the process of net zero, when there are other steps that we never talked about before, which are the avoid, reduce, substitute, recycle, that are supposed to come before, because there could be an incentive for even for the carbon market participants to disincentivize their buyers to do these steps, because if you don't do this, you buy more credits, right? Anyone venture to answer this part?
So from the investor's perspective, we believe that if a company is joining a science-based target, that's almost like a holy grail. So if they do, then they cannot count, unless it's residual or hard to abate carbon emissions, they cannot count those offsetting credits that they buy towards reduction of emissions. So from an investor's point of view, we can actually understand whether this company is seriously doing offsetting, or they just seriously doing carbon reduction, emissions reduction, or they are offsetting it, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is that there is a lot of talk, and in Hong Kong it's not happening yet. But in Europe, as you know, the CEOs and the C-suites, their remuneration is tied towards carbon reduction, emissions reductions. And so if that remuneration is tied towards true reductions rather than offsets, that makes a difference, and that incentivizes the C-suite people to really do the real things.
If you talk about remuneration point, that will be one of the key changes in the upcoming Hong Kong listing rule revision. So the new Hong Kong listing rule ESG code will asking companies to disclose whether they have factored in all the climate-related consideration in their remuneration policy. So that's also one step forward in the market, no matter in terms of IFTA or Hong Kong listing rule. I see Andy has some more.
I can add in a little bit. The cap and trade system, which I talked before, can also be implemented in your scenario, because I see a lot of deployment of cap and trade already in Europe, because the industry is capped at a certain level, and that level is adjusted over years. So of course you can cap by either you pay tax if you're above it, or you buy the offsets, like you say. But the board will have the initiative because it is decreased over years, and the company will have incentive to actually reduce its footprint rather than going for offsets. And by this kind of system, cap and trade system, it's already deploying a lot of places. And I think it really gives the board incentive, the company's incentive. All right, if I don't do it, it will be decreased over time. I settled this year, but next year I cannot do that because it's lesser already. I need to find ways to mitigate my concern and reduce it rather than, oh, no problem, I'll just go for offset. And in addition to Agnes' point, is the remuneration is tied to that. It will give more incentive. And I think that cap and trade is already running in Europe.
Any other questions?
Could I have a little plug? Thank you. So if you are interested in learning about climate and climate governance, Hong Kong now has a climate governance initiative, Hong Kong chapter. And it is a climate governance initiative was set up by the World Economic Forum in 2019. So they had 8 principles of climate governance to help leaders of businesses and listed company directors to really get more awareness and more knowledge so that they can actually act on climate action in their own companies. So Hong Kong Institute of Directors is the host of this chapter. It's the 24th chapter of the whole world. Now we have 26 globally. And this chapter is now tasked with, in Hong Kong, offering all sorts of education, including free curriculum to help directors and senior executives to uplift their climate governance acumen. So I would invite you to go on the website of Hong Kong Institute of Directors and the About Us. You hover around it and then look for Climate Governance Initiative Hong Kong chapter. We link you to global research and very, very high quality pieces of information about climate and about carbon risk and things like that. Everything's free on the website.